Hello everyone, welcome to the whoa, that was a bad start. I could cut that, but we're going to keep going to the Simply Soccer podcast, the Simple podcast. Welcome to the Simply Soccer podcast, everyone. I hope you are having a fantastic start to 2018. I hope you've had a great day so far. Hopefully, you guys have been doing some goal setting. You've been, making sure you're planning out your year, setting your intentions like we went over in the last podcast. Remember, do not just set resolutions. Resolutions are crap. Resolutions hold so little substance usually have very little behind them and are usually thought up without much depth. Or without a person going into them. Now, it's better probably than doing nothing, but still, you want solid, strong goals and intentions going into the year, not weak, off the cuff, watered down resolutions that you set just because that was the expectation. So hopefully you have done some goal setting. Hopefully you know what direction you want to move in this year. And even if you don't, it's okay. Don't worry. You're not always going to know exactly what you want. But you should be taking steps towards discovering what it is you want. Discovering what it is you're passionate about. Discovering what it is you want to move towards. So I hope you have been doing that. But anyway, in this podcast, we're going to be getting in deeper into a few topics that I went over a bit in some of the videos this week, but I definitely think deserve a little more coverage and a little more explanation because they're very important ideas. So a few announcements to kick off this is the series I mentioned last week that I was developing, where I was going to kind of take a camera with me and record a lot of my day. Has been delayed for a little bit just because I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I might need a better camera before I go do it. I'm not sure, but at some point, hopefully, I'll be doing that kind of series thing. Also, we're trying to go back to a video a day at the moment, so you'll start seeing hopefully a little more consistency from the channel again towards the end of 2017. We fell off a little bit in getting a video out every single day, but we're back on track, scheduling things, doing things ahead of time, so hopefully that will be the case. We'll also be active on Instagram again, all that fun stuff. Also, we're going to be doing live streams again this year. That's something that we dabbled in the past, and I did really enjoy doing them, having you guys there live to ask me questions and just interact with each other and with me. And that was really cool to me, just to kind of have you there while we went over just certain topics or just kind of talked. So we will definitely be doing that again. And we will be starting this live stream tomorrow when this podcast comes out. So Sunday, I will have an announcement up on the YouTube community tab, and I will also have one on Instagram. So if you have a question you want to ask me and have it potentially answered in that live stream, make sure you put it in one of those places. If not, you can ask me it live and I might get to it, although there's no guarantee that I will. Okay, so other announcements. I think one I want to mention to you guys is I may be changing the format of these podcasts slightly. I want to make them not only about going over your questions and topics that I think will help you and topics that have just been beneficial to me as well. I also want to give you kind of updates with what's going on with me and what's going on with the channel, because I don't think I really have a video, or even I have the community tab on YouTube, and I have Instagram, but I used to use Snapchat a bit, but I don't use it that much. But I don't really have much that in the form of kind of going over, what I'm learning, what I'm doing, what's going on with me. And I know a lot of you guys ask about that sometimes. So in certain podcasts, I'll give updates on that kind of thing, maybe an update on where Simply Soccer is, and an update where I am, what I'm working on, all that fun stuff. So I may be doing that in future podcasts as well, along with going over the helpful content, because one thing I want to do is also go over stuff I'm currently learning. I'm currently reading, for example, right now I'm reading a book called The Fifth Agreement. If you've ever heard of the four agreements, it's the follow-up book from that. I'm not going to get too much into that book because it's a very kind of spiritual type book, and a lot of the ideas are well, let's just say they're out there. I really like the book, and I think it's been, for me, really eye-opening, and it's something I'm going to continue to explore. But it's one of those things that I feel like a lot of people will look at and automatically go, that's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. So it's not something I really want to talk about just yet, because I don't want to have the podcast focus on something that would be considered that controversial at the moment. Although I still think it's an incredible book. I love the ideas, and I will be continuing to learn from it. So another series I am also considering is every single month going over a video, which will be basically what I've learned over the last month. That will probably happen. We'll probably start at the end of January, where it will be a video format where it will go over everything I've basically learned, the important things I've learned, soccer and otherwise, things that have helped me, the progress I've made, and then you guys can kind of chip in as well with the progress you've made, your goals, all this stuff. And it'll just be kind of a good way of keeping each other accountable and going over each other's progress and kind of, you know, trading notes and all that cool stuff. So that's it for the announcements. I know that took a little bit. I got to look at the time here. Yeah. Okay. So in this one, again, like I said, the main content of this podcast, I want to explore some of the ideas I mentioned earlier in the week in certain videos. In the Monday Motivation, we went over an idea of it being your fault. And I want to explain that a little more deep because I knew some people would take that the wrong way. I had a feeling I would get some people who would take that to the extreme and go, well, what about this? And what about this? Oh, was it my fault this person died? All this kind of crap. And obviously that's not what I meant. And that video wasn't for people who can't, you know, sit down and think something through for 10 seconds in order to realize that's not the message. So we will be diving into that a little better and why this philosophy of it's your fault is actually a really good philosophy to take on board, but more on that later. We're also going to go over a video basically I think I released in the middle of the week. I'm recording this podcast actually on the same day I released this video, and it's over the idea of playing the way you train and always doing your best, which we'll dive into a little bit as well. And we're going to go into another idea also that kind of plays into that, which is forgiving yourself for past errors and mistakes. This is something that I'm learning through the Fifth Agreement. Actually, a lot of these ideas are from the Fifth Agreement. They're just, I think, more of the easily digestible ideas and not some of the more out there kind of controversial ideas. So that's what we're going to be going over. And let's start it off with playing the way you train. And this is something, because I get a lot of comments, and I know probably a lot of other YouTubers do in this niche, about training, about how to get the most out of your training, about what you should be training, like how you should be training, how often should you be doing this? I mean, people, they really get worked up in the details, and it is important because obviously there is a way to calibrate and optimize your routine for maximum results. But I mean, first and foremost is to do something. You know, the reason I talk about consistency so often is because that's the place to start. Once you have the consistency, you can start to calibrate it and to optimize it. But consistency is a habit, and you need to develop that habit before you go thinking about, I'm going to practice for exactly this amount of time, doing this amount of, you know, this exact thing and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, thinking about tracking and logging everything and doing all these complicated things or adding more and more to it. The first, you know, key thing is getting that consistency. So doing something, Jocko Willink, someone who I really like and is very motivational, you know, when he talks about exercise in his book, which is, I think, the Discipline Field Manual, something like that, he speaks about, you know, because people will ask him what they should do. And he says, do something every day. You know, it's do something. Start out with doing something, and you'll learn as you go. You'll discover more as you do more research, and you'll find what works best for you. But you got to start somewhere, so start doing something. But that's not the topic. That's not the topic we're talking about right now. We're talking about playing the way you train. And this is an idea also from the Fifth Agreement or the Four Agreements, which I can't remember which agreement it is, maybe the fourth one, where it's always, is practice makes the master and always try your best. So the reason he mentions this is because a lot of times when we go through, even if we're going just through life and we're doing certain things, a lot of times we're going through the motions. We're on autopilot. and we're not really focusing or really are aware of what we're doing sometimes, even if it's a certain skill-based thing. You know, I could be editing a video, for example, and not be focused and not be putting my best effort into the video at that time. And this will happen in your training as well. You know, a lot of players will do what's called going through the motions. You know, a lot of players, I think, will do this because they don't want to seem like a try-hard, but who cares about, you know, I always found that to be funny. Who cares about appearing like a try-hard? You know, a try-hard is someone who's trying hard to improve. You know, so whatever, who cares what anyone thinks? You know, do your best in every training session. And what we go over in that video is doing your best means something different in each moment. You know, I think a lot of players get caught up, and I actually get comments like this from players saying, you know, like one week I was training and I was doing so well, you know, I was playing to the best of my ability and it was so well, and then the next week I was trying as hard as I can, but it wasn't going as well. That's absolutely okay. That's going to happen. The important thing is no matter what the circumstance, that you're trying your best and you're completely focused and you're giving it your all. Here's a good way of looking at it. If you are tired and sore and you're coming off maybe a big workout or something and you go to train the next day, you're not going to be able to do as well as you would if you were refreshed and rested and had a lot of energy. Like if you compared both of those workouts to the best of your ability, obviously the one where you're more rested, you have more energy, you know, you're more prepared, whatever it is, you're going to, you know, if you just looked at the two in isolation, that one's obviously going to be a better looking training session. However, when you are tired, you still can train to the best of your ability in that moment. Don't use it as an excuse to be like, I'm not going to do anything, or I'm just going to go through the motions. Still do the best you can in that moment. It may not be as good as what you can do in a different moment in the future, or you have done in the past when you were more rested or more energized, but you're still there and you can still put in as much effort or do it to the best of your ability you can right then and there. So I hope that makes sense. So the next time you're at the gym and you're tired, you know, you may not be able to do as much as you can later in the week when you're more rested, or when you're coming on, when you're just feeling better. Maybe you're a little sick. Maybe you have a slight injury that's preventing you from doing certain things, but you can still do the things that you can do to the best of your ability, right? And this is where the idea of the way you train is the way you'll play, you know? The great thing about a match is, and a lot of, you know, if you're training when you're more tired, and it's not like you're missing rest, it's just you're a little sore on that day and you're a little tired. I mean, the great thing about training in preparation for matches is there are going to be times in the matches when you're fresh, you're energized, and you have, you know, you're able to play basically at 100%, but there's also going to be times in that match where you're not at 100%. You might be carrying a knock. It might be later in the game. You know, even training to the best of your ability when you're a little tired is going to have a benefit and translate into matches, because they're going to be, you know, later in the game, you're not going to be at 100%. But if you have conditioned yourself to be playing at the best of your ability, even when you're not at 100%, that's going to benefit you later in those matches when you are more tired, while other players, you know, are giving up a little bit or going through the motions because they don't want to waste more energy or because they're not focused. You'll be focused because you've been practicing even when you've not been at 100%. So just to take away from this, and the point of that video was, in each moment, you have the capacity to do the best you possibly can in that moment. Again, it won't be the same moment to moment, right? You know, my capacity to create a podcast right now, to the best of my ability, may be different in another moment. But I can, at this very moment, do everything I possibly can to make the best one I can. You know, and there might be another moment in time where I could have made a better one because, I don't know, I'm more awake maybe, or I have more energy, or something else. There could be some other kind of components or things that would make it better or whatever. But that doesn't matter, because in this moment, I'm just trying to do the best I can in this moment. So think about your training in that way, of doing just the best you can in this moment. Even if you're tired, even if you're a little sore, or you have all the energy in the world, if you just maintain your focus in that moment, don't think about past training sessions, don't think about future training sessions, just focus on that moment that you're in and focus on doing the best you can in that moment. And if you continually do that and you make that a habit, your results are going to go through the roof, especially if you're someone who has been going through the motions in the past, okay? So just remember, focus best you can in the moment and go from there. So that's the first idea that was based on a video we did. Just going to see how we're doing on time here. Okay, we're fine. And that was the video on basically an easy training habit you can do to get better results, titled something like that. Don't remember. So let's go over the next thing. And here's a big one for me. Let's go over forgiving yourself. And this does not just apply to football. This applies to life. You have to have the ability to forgive yourself for any mistakes or failures. And we've gone over this before. We've gone over that I don't see mistakes or failures as necessarily a bad thing, but I do understand, and I'm not naive to the fact that mistakes and failures are, from a societal perspective, seen as bad. So I understand that there are outside and external influences that see mistakes and failures as bad, that ridicule people who make mistakes and failures, the irony being that they've also made mistakes and failures. But I understand that. But to change your mindset, you have to tune that out to a certain degree. Like if I didn't tune that kind of stuff out, for example, I would have quit YouTube years ago because, the amount of times I'll get a bad comment or something where I could just allow that to affect me has been numerous. And the more popular something gets, the more of those that come in. A lot of the good stuff comes in too, but that stuff comes in as well. So you can't be too concerned about the opinions of others in that regard, but I am aware that it exists, and sometimes it exists from people who are very close to you, so I'm not trying to dismiss it and say it's just a simple thing to do. No, this is something that definitely takes a bit of work. But learn to forgive yourself for the fuck-ups, for the mistakes, for the so-called failures, And what this does is it not only allows you to move on from mistakes you made a long time ago that you've never forgiven yourself for, or the failures or bad things you did or whatever it is that you didn't allow yourself to move on from. Because if you don't forgive yourself for those things, they stay with you. They continue to haunt you. Actually, if we go back to the Fifth Agreement, one of the things they discuss in there is, one mistake equals one punishment. He goes over every action has an equal and opposite reaction, is it? Something like that, which is Newton's second, third law. I can't remember which. I'll have to look that up. But what he does go over is, there's a judgment for every one action. So let's say you make a mistake and you feel shame for it, but then you forgive yourself for it and you move on. That's the only time you need to do that process. But if there's something in your past that you never forgave yourself for and you continue to beat yourself up about, you've just allowed one mistake to punish you 10,000 times, right? One mistake, one punishment, you feel bad about it, or you forgive yourself and you move on. But don't beat yourself up over it. And let's bring this back to soccer. Don't beat yourself up about that bad game you had last week or even years ago. Don't beat yourself up for whatever it is you did in the past. Maybe you didn't do enough training. Maybe, you yelled at a teammate. I don't know what it is for you. But learn to forgive yourself and move on from that. Second thing about this is when you start learning to do this, when you start forgiving yourself for your mistakes, for your failures, you start to move on more quickly, but you also start to take more risks because you're aware that even if you do fail and you do make mistakes, and you don't aim to make mistakes, you don't aim to fail, but even if you do, you know that you have the capacity to forgive yourself and move on. You know that you have the capacity to learn from your mistakes and failures and move on, so you start taking more action. Maybe in games you start playing more of your game and you start coming out of your shell a little bit. Maybe you start expressing yourself more on the pitch. You start playing more to your strengths instead of playing so reserved because you were nervous about making mistakes. But learning to recognize that you're human and that mistakes are inevitably going to happen anyway, you start to look at them differently. You start to see them not as that negative. You start to, tune out the people that start yelling at you over mistakes. And of course, you should analyze your mistakes, especially when they're related to something like football, so that you don't continue to make them. but you do need to learn to move past them, because it does not serve you to hold on to your mistakes and failures and things you think you shouldn't have done. Because if you hold on to those things, they will continue to haunt you. They will continue to play at your confidence, and you're not going to be able to improve beyond that until you forgive yourself for that. So just going in with that idea of being able to forgive yourself, of being able to move past mistakes, move past failures in your game, move past bad training sessions, whatever it is, and just be like, for example, here's a good way of putting it. We all have this ideal version of ourselves. We all want to be a certain way or a certain thing, and there's so much I could say about that as well, but I don't want to get too much into that in this. But there's, like, for example, we all want to improve for the most part. So you say, I want to be a soccer player that plays like this. Like, maybe you compare yourself to a certain professional, for example. Maybe as far as your character goes, you want to be, so non-soccer related, you want to be really confident socially, maybe. Maybe you want to be, you just want to be yourself, like something like that. You want to not be embarrassed to be yourself. Let's say that's what it is. The cool thing about making that agreement and saying, I'm going to do my best, and this is where the 4 agreements come in, saying, I'm going to do my best that I can every single moment, but I'm also going to forgive myself when I slip up and I'm not able to do my best, right? I'm going to do my best to change, but if I slip up, I'm able to forgive myself for that as well. I've been using this method to where I'm just like, if I break an agreement I've made with myself, so let's say I'm going to be more like this in this situation, and I forget to do it because obviously we all are programmed in a certain way based on our past habits, environment and all that, so it takes a lot to change these things. So if I kind of go back into my default mode, and I wasn't able to follow my agreement, it says to forgive yourself. If you break the agreement, remake the agreement and go again and again and again. Perseverance. You forgive yourself. You recognize that you need practice if you want to master this thing, whatever it is, and you go again and again and again. Okay? So, as far as football goes, you got to just look at your mistake, forgive yourself. Maybe you broke an agreement, I don't know what it is, remake that agreement and you go again and again and again. And the reason a lot of players don't do this, a lot of people don't do this, is because they're so hard on themselves when they do make that mistake. It feels like death to them. It feels like the worst thing possible. But once you learn to just be able to forgive yourself for that, it just makes it so much easier to move on and also not be afraid of making mistakes, which is essential if you want to become better at anything. Because if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're just not going to take any action. And if you're not taking any action, because we all, nothing's going to change. Because we all know, if you want to change, you want to improve, you want to grow, you can only gather so much information before you need to take action. You can have all the info in the world. And I mean literally you could have every single golden nugget of information stored in your head and be able to recall it at a moment notice, and it will do you no good unless you take some action, some form of action on that information. If you just sit on that information, again, you could be the most knowledgeable person in the world with all this info. If you don't act in any way on it, it's useless to you. It will not change anything. You'll just be some dude with all this information, not unable, but unwilling to make the changes necessary, to take the action necessary. And I think forgiveness plays a lot into getting you into a state of mind where you're taking more action because you know that you can forgive yourself and you know that mistakes are natural. Okay, so we'll leave that there. Let's go over the final thing I have on here. And this actually went a lot faster than I realized. We're only like at 23, 24 minutes. So that's fine. These don't all have to be super long. But next, let's go over the idea of it being your fault. And that video I did on this topic. So what prompted me to make this video in the first place, the Monday motivation video, I'll link it down below. Hopefully I remember to do that if you're interested in going and seeing that. And what prompted me to make this video is because I saw a video about this topic and I linked to that in my video as well. It's a kick in the ass, but in like the best way possible. It's a short 2 to 3 minute video I saw. And it's just so motivational. It's one of the most motivational videos I've ever seen. It's short, sweet, and to the point, going over how you need to take responsibility for your life. And that's essentially what it is. That's essentially what he's saying. He's saying take responsibility. It's not anyone else's fault that you are where you are. You know, it's not anyone else's fault that you didn't go to the gym or you didn't take that action. But it's also nobody else's fault when you do take the action, when you do go and do the thing. What he's essentially saying is just take responsibility for everything in your life. Now, of course, there are going to be certain things that are outside of your control that are going to happen to you. That is inevitable. However, it does not serve you to become this perpetual victim just because that's a possibility. Like one person left a pretty ridiculous comment on that video going, well, what if someone's mom dies, is that my fault? I'm like, what are you talking about? If that's where you're coming from and you're just trying to poke holes in the logic I'm giving you, you're completely missing the message of the video. The whole point of the video is to, for me and for you to recognize that you are responsible for your life, for what you do. You are responsible for whether you go and do this thing or you don't do this thing. Every action you take does have a certain ripple in the world, in your life. It does have a certain impact in your life and by extension other people's in a way too. So knowing that, having that information makes it so that you are responsible for what happens to you. And people will be like, well, this person did this and that person did that and this happened. I'm in this unfortunate circumstance. And I can empathize with that to a certain extent, but it's still not an excuse to not try and take control of the things you have control over, because I guarantee you, whatever situation you're in, there's been someone who's been in a much worse situation, not just a little bit worse, a much worse situation, a much more hopeless looking situation, and they were still able to achieve their dreams, accomplish what they wanted, and so on. There are so many cases of this. So whenever someone likes to play the victim or something like this, I always I always tense up a little bit and get a little emotional about it, because there's so many people who could complain, who do not, who are in much worse of a circumstance than you are, and yet they found out and they figured out that they could take responsibility for their life, and they did. That's the big thing, they did. So I get the point. The whole phrase "it's your fault" may be misleading, but because it sounds like a blame. It sounds like I'm attacking you. Like it's your fault. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what the video that motivated me in order to create that video in the first place was saying either. What he's just saying was coming from a place of taking responsibility. That's all it was. And I don't think too many, level-headed people or people who are on the track of improvement would disagree with the idea that your life improvement growth is your responsibility. And again, I understand there will be external circumstances, people and things that will present themselves as roadblocks in your life. But there's always a way around that for the most part, at least in many of our situations. We could go off the rails in this and talk about people who are in the worst kinds of situations, but we're not going to have that conversation just now, because we can go way off the rails on that. But for the most part, you are responsible for your life. People, if for example, someone always asks me, my parents don't allow me to do this or that. And I go, well, do what you can do. Okay. Like someone will say, like, my parents, I don't know, won't let me train, or I can't join this team, blah, blah, blah. And, they'll get so hung up on that they won't do anything. You can always do something. And it's your decision whether you do something or you don't do something. That's the big thing here. You may be prevented from doing something. Okay. I understand that. I've had that myself with parents or other circumstances as well, where I couldn't do something because I was being prevented. Even though sometimes, even in those cases, I would just ignore them and do it anyway. I'm not suggesting you do that. That's I don't want angry parents coming to me and saying their child was kicking the ball in the house and breaking things because of me. But what I am saying is, there's always something you can do. There's always an element of control you do have over your life, no matter what the circumstance. So do what you can do. You know, looking at one thing and saying, oh, these people are preventing me from doing that one thing. First, you have to ask yourself, is it actually true that these people are preventing me from doing this? Because a lot of the time you may find it's not true and there's another way you can do it. And if it is, so maybe if it's like your parents, you can't get to your training or whatever it is, there would still probably be ways around that. You can carpool, you can get bus, you can do that. I mean, there are people who go out on hours and hours journeys just to get to training sessions. But let's just say that's what it is, something like that. You know, find the time to train on your own. Find the time to still get your training in. You know, there's so many things you could do. So even if there are things that are legitimately you're being prevented from doing because parents or teachers or whatever, and I mean legitimately, like you absolutely can't do it, like they've taken away the tools necessary for you to do it or whatever, then do what you can in some other way. Take some other kind of action. Look at it as an opportunity to do something else maybe. You know, one thing I love that Jocko Willink says, going back to him, is he would always say good whenever someone would come and complain to him. And he was a military dude, so he'd have like, he said a friend of his who was in the military as well, come up to him and say something like, oh, I got bad news, blah, 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 the mission's been canceled, blah, 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 we do this. And he would say, good. And he'd say, gives us more time to focus on a different mission. And then he said another one came in like, oh, someone told him, I forget exactly what it is, so this may be made up a little bit, but like, oh, we didn't get the new advanced gear that we wanted. And he'll go, good. You know, we'll be able to get more training in with this gear, or we'll be able to become more resilient because of this. And what he's doing is he's looking for the opportunities in the so-called problems. And that's a great mindset to have. So it's like, oh, I'm prevented from going to my team training maybe on this night. You could go, good. Gives me more time to focus on individual training, working on my weaknesses. You know, it could be something like that, or good, I can work on the mental side of the game, which I've been meaning to do. There's always something you can do. So don't use someone preventing you from doing something or some external circumstance preventing you from doing something, which again, you have to ask the question, is this thing or this person really actually preventing me from doing this? Or am I just like, this is the only way I can do it? And so I'm going to give up and not try anything else. So first ask that question. And if it really is you can't, then just look for what else you can do. It's not an excuse to do nothing. Okay? So that's a way of taking responsibility. That's a way of saying it's your fault. It's your fault if you don't go do the thing. But it's also your fault if you do go do the thing. It's your fault in a good way, which means you took the action. It's going to be your fault when you become a great footballer. It's going to be your fault when you're making progress and you're growing and you're becoming a better person. It's going to be your fault when the people around you aren't improving, but you are. Because you took the action necessary, you took the responsibility, you took it upon yourself to make the changes in your own life and take the action that you needed to take in order to get to where you want to go. And honestly, in this day and age, there's very little excuse to not go on and improve and grow because there's so much information. You know, if you're confused about something, you can go on YouTube and watch a video on it and learn more. You can buy books. You can get free ebooks online if you just look up the title. I mean, the amount of books I've read that I've just typed the title in Google and it's come up is unbelievable. Like, there's so many resources out there. YouTube, Google, just Googling things. So if you're stuck on anything, you can't figure something out, you have that resource. But a lot of people just give up when the first thing they try doesn't work. So take responsibility for your outcomes, for what you do. Forgive yourself if when you do go out and do something and you make a mistake and it's your fault, you know, whatever. Forgive yourself and move on. It's not a bad thing. I'm not saying when you do something bad and it's your fault, that's necessarily a bad thing. It could just be you try to do something, it didn't come off. Okay, moving on. What's the big deal? You know, I had a game and I played like crap. All right, I'll analyze it. I'll look at what I didn't do well, why it happened, and I'll put that into my training and I'll move on to the next one. Okay? I forgive myself. I'm not going to get hung up because I had a bad game. Everyone has a bad game. You know, I might feel a bit sour right after the match, but if I allow it to fester any longer, it's just going to affect my performances in future matches and training. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for today. Let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, there we go. Wandered into the 30-minute plus mark there. All right, so I really do hope you guys are having a fantastic new year so far. I really appreciate all of you who are involved with the channel, who are showing your support for the channel, all of you in Ultimate Soccer Skills, all of you on the email list, all of you subscribed to the channel, to Instagram, all of that. I really do appreciate that. And you know, I'm really looking to grow this channel even more in 2018, have a lot of stuff in the works, in the planning phase of a lot of things as well. So I'm super excited to, to bring you a lot more this year and hopefully help you along your journey as a footballer and just as a person as well. And hopefully we can continue to grow together in 2018. All right, guys, so thank you so much. Let us think of a hashtag. I don't know why I don't actually have a hashtag prepared before podcasts. I almost never do, but let me take a look at my notes. Let's do hashtag forgive, just to kind of remind you of that one. So hashtag forgive or hashtag forgiveness, whichever one you want. If you put that down, if you put hashtag forgive down there, you put that down there, it shows me that you've listened all the way through. But also if you have a comment or a question and you use that hashtag, I will try and answer you. You'll get priority on that. And I just like doing this because I like to see the people who actually go to the end and listen to the whole thing. And so I can acknowledge you and thank you for listening all the way through. All right, guys, thank you for listening all the way through. I really appreciate it, like I said. And I will see you hopefully tomorrow during the live stream. Pop in to say hello, ask some questions, and it's going to be a good time. All right, guys, talk soon.